Hello and welcome to The Final Frontiersman, a YouTube channel about all things Trek. I'm Bill, and today we are going to be reviewing the latest release for the Star Trek Adventures 2nd Edition role-playing game. This is the 23rd Century Campaign Guide. As always for our reviews, we are using the alert system. Yellow alerts for the things we want to draw your attention to, red alerts for the things we think are great, and the rarely used black alerts for the things that are game-changing, the big ones. Without further ado, let me jump into the small window. Let's take a look at the 23rd Century Campaign Guide. First of all, I have two disclaimers I need to get out of the way, and they're connected actually. For this review, I did receive a free copy of the PDF, but it actually was not given to me for the purposes of this review. That leads into the second disclaimer, which is this is the first Star Trek Adventures physical book that I have actually written content for. So there is stuff from me in this book. So I did receive a PDF copy of the book because of that, and I'll be reviewing it. I did also receive a copy and some visual assets from Sophie as usual for purposes of review. So as usual, thank you, Sophie, but also thank you, Jim, and everyone for including me on this. And I will talk about what I wrote later on. But without further ado, let's take a look at this. So starting with, well, first, before we start in chapter 1, let's take a look on the inner cover. The inner cover of the front of the book. I love it. Oh my God. You know how I feel about uniforms. They have a whole list of uniforms of the century in the front cover. So you get a visual guide of the progression of how the uniforms looked over the century according to the series that we currently know. Love having material like that, and I think it's a great resource for new players coming into the game or don't know much about Star Trek to have that visual guide right before it even starts. Easy for anyone to find. You know what it looks like automatically. Love that. Okay, going into chapter 1. Chapter 1 is supplemental game material, and I am going to start off the first part with a yellow alert. The reason why I want to draw your attention, they have new environment options in this book. And what these are for these environments in character creation, they are using homeworlds instead of the normal environments found in the core rulebook. So during character creations, you could use planets like Andoria, Beta Z, Denobula, Earth, Kronos, Risa, Romulus, Tellar Prime, Trill, and Vulcan, and these are not restricted to species. So you could be raised on another alien world, similar to how, for example, Michael Burnham was raised on Vulcan. So you can add that in your game as part of character creation, and they, of course, have a nice overview of the world, details on each of the worlds, plus the choices that they give you if you use it during character creation, like the values with samples included, so you have an idea what kind of values you might have by being raised on that world, plus attribute and department increases as always. Stand down, yellow alert. I thought that was a cool new addition. They also have new career path options. In this case, there is one. It is a free trader, so you could play a non-aligned free trader, and of course, new traits, values, attribute points, department increase, adjustments, all of those things, focuses, talents, as you would expect for a career path. That's what's included in here. There are also new career events, and what's cool about this is a 23rd century campaign guide, so it's all about the series from post-Enterprise, about 50 years post-Enterprise, to the original series, Strange New Worlds, the animated series, all the way up into the original Trek movies. That's pretty exciting. So it has a lot of stuff to cover, which means there are a lot of events in that century because it's a campaign guide. So these events are tied into the major events that have happened in the century. So for example, they list ideas such as the invention of duotronic computing, the logic extremist attacks, the Tarsus 4 massacre, the Gorn conflict, the Federation Klingon war, the Romulan border skirmishes, the Treaty of Organia, the establishment of the Nimbus 3 colony, the Babel conference, the Memory Alpha disaster, Well Probe crisis, and the destruction of Praxis and the Khitomer Accords. So all those major events we see throughout the different series and the movies, you can now add those into your character as part of character creation as your career event. With the caveat, of course, your character has to actually be old enough to have experienced it. So if you have somebody who is born during the movie era, they're not going to be part of the Federation Klingon War that happened 30, 40 years before that. It makes sense, but keep that in mind. There's a little more restriction of how they are because these are not generic, broad career events. There are some optional rules that need to be noted, and I'm giving these a red alert. These are optional rules that are pulled from and then adapted to 2nd edition from the Federation Klingon War tactical campaign that was released towards the end of the 1st edition run. So these are mechanics including casualties, how every crew member who is killed should be named. There should be something personal said about that character, as well as in general casualties, injuries that occur during battle. Fatigue system, so optional rule adapted for 2nd edition, again straight from the tactical campaign. Scars, trauma, and because I loved it so much in the 1st edition tactical campaign, the fact that it's back here, I'm upgrading this red alert to a black alert because of traumas. This is a new means of player elimination, player death in the game. Basically, your character doesn't actually die, but the traumas are tied to your values. So that means if all of your values become a trauma through the course of these mechanics, your character is not able to continue doing their job in Starfleet or whatever polity they might be working for. So the reason why this is all red alert and black alert, the fact this is game changing. This is a new layer added on top of a game. Just as I was impressed with it in the tactical campaign, this adds weight onto some very serious, some very heavy, some very sensitive issues. So these are something that you can't, or maybe the word is you shouldn't, just add lightly into the game without consulting with your players first. Or if you're a player and you want this in the game, run it by your GM, run it by the group first. These things really add a layer of drama and seriousness that these topics of war, trauma, scars, PTSD, all of this deserves. And it's done very well, very respectfully for the material. So I like having it in the game. I like having it as an option, but it is a very serious and heavy thing that I believe I mentioned in the tactical campaign review. A lot of games just wave by how serious a topic like war is. This focuses on how even if you win, even if you survive, even if you're not in a battle yourself, it can mess you up and ruin you. War is hell. And these rules convey that. Stand down, black alert. That's chapter 1. All the new supplemental rules and mechanical elements. Now, chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5, the next 4 chapters, are going to be your lore chapters, your content chapters, where all the story and inspiration is going to come from for your campaigns. It breaks the century down into 4 eras to focus on based on what the dominant event or dominant situation of the galaxy was during that specific point in time. Chapter 2 is the growth of the Federation era, and this runs from 2200 to 2255. So it's a 55, 56 year span of history for the 23rd century. So what's inside here? Let me give this chapter a red alert too, just to get us started off, because this is going to be a similar pattern for the next 4 chapters. So this chapter in particular explains the first half of the century, and the reason why it's a red alert in my book is this is an unexplored area of Star Trek. This is similar to the Lost era in the 24th century. This is the lost era of the 23rd century. This is about 50 years after Enterprise it starts, and 50 years before Discovery it starts. So there's like 100-year stretch from Enterprise to Discovery where we really don't know what's going on. This chapter gives a lot of information, and not just for this century and these 55 years. It also touches on what happened at the end of the 22nd century, the end post-Enterprise, which leads into the 23rd century. So this contains a lot of story hooks, a lot of material, a lot of elements that you can use to create your own adventures in this section of time that has yet to be explored in televised Star Trek. So this is like blank slate. You do this chapter, you do this period, 2200 to 2255. It's all open for you. Whatever you want it to be, it can be. And the details in here are really good. I was excited reading through it. And I know I said I wrote for this. I didn't write any of this. That's why I'm excited for it. I didn't get to read any of this until I got the PDF. So it was exciting for me. The only thing I knew before I got this book was what I wrote. And actually, I honestly forgot half of it because it was a year ago. So this blew me away in a very, very good way. Just love the kind of information they have in here. So aside from the lore, aside from the history of what's happening, you get technology in the period, the scientific advancements that happened within this period. There are sidebars about the different worlds of the Federation which joined during this time, so you could play games that are part of these first contacts or these joining missions where you're getting these new worlds inducted into the Federation. It's an exciting time for the galaxy. Aside from that, it also goes on to talk about what was the Klingon Empire doing during this time? What was their behavior during this period? Their technology. They're still with the Herc or whatever they are, starships, and they're transitioning into the D7, so it's explaining that whole situation. The Romulans as well talks about what they're up to in the post-Earth Romulan War period of the Federation's history. Goes into a whole section about politics, the major polities of the era, which are again Federation, Klingons, Romulans, Vulcans, of course, are still a major power on their own, as well as being part of the Federation. Plus minor polities like the Cardassian First Republic at this time, before the Cardassian Union, the Denobulans, the Ferengi, what else do they have? Gorn, Orion Syndicate, Tholian Assembly, and Trill. You get information on all of them in this early, wide open blank slate period of the Star Trek universe. I loved reading this chapter. This might be one of my, I love all the lore chapters in this book, but this might be one of my favorites because it's the one that gets my imagination going the most, because I know the least about it because it wasn't on TV. Love this chapter. Stand down, red alert. Going into chapter 3. I think I can go through this a little quickly because it follows, all these 4 chapters here follow a very similar pattern because it wants to set up the same way for each era. This era is the War and the Red Angel Crisis era from 2256 to 2258. So it's only a 2-year stretch. This is basically the information covered in Discovery Seasons 1 and 2, which also appeared in the first edition Discovery Campaign Guide, the first Discovery Campaign Guide that came out. So this recaps it very nicely, that information. State of the galaxy during these 2 seasons. What's the technology like for Federation, Klingons, and Romulans at this time? But the thing that I really dug, the thing that I really loved, of course, were the politics and the other polities of this time. So besides from Federation, Klingon, Romulan, those ones that always get the glory, the Cardassian First Republic. I thought in particular this chapter, the entries on Cardassian First Republic and the Ferengi Alliance were the most inspiring for stories and story hooks. They came up with some really clever ideas. I like the hooks that they peppered in for these minor polities at a time that we really don't know them. Because, of course, at this time, Ferengi haven't really been encountered by the Federation, not officially at least. They're really not known. Cardassians are not the authoritarian dictators and military power that we know by DS9 at this time. It was so fun to read these in these early chapters here. Those two in particular. But aside from them, you also have the Tholians, the Zinkethi, I believe, Zinkethi Coalition, which in the future will lead into a war with the Federation. So there's a lot for game masters to sink their teeth into, and there's a lot of reference for players to jump in to familiarize yourself with what is the state of the galaxy, not just during the events of Discovery 1 and 2, but surrounding those events too, so you can flesh out and play other polities not involved in the war, at least not directly involved in the Federation-Klingon War. Another great chapter. So now, moving on, chapter 4. This era is called Federation and Empire. This ranges from 2259 to 2269. So this is going to be the era that covers Strange New Worlds and the original series. I don't believe it might contain part of the animated series too. I'm like forgetting my timeline here when that actually picks up, if that was still at the end of the 60s or beginning of the 70s in the era. But it's basically the original series Strange New Worlds era. Same thing, state of the galaxy focuses a lot on the Gorn crisis that we see happen in Strange New Worlds. This chapter, it's not only a good coverage of the TOS era itself of what you see on TV, because this also dabbles into Star Trek Adventures' original setting of the Shackleton Expanse. So you get some detail on what's happening in the Shackleton Expanse and what relates to the Shackleton Expanse campaign during this era. And I know there's a lot of you out there that are fans of it. You played the campaign in first edition, you're adapting it, which is easy to do, into second edition. It's a great setting. My game's set in the Shackleton Expanse, even though we're not doing the campaign itself. So having this information there to flesh out not only if you're playing in this era, but you can use it for TNG era and later, because now you know a little bit more of the history and what's going on in there. Always love when they do stuff like this. Always love the synergies that come out of this kind of information. Again, same thing. You get technology, you get politics. One thing I really love, of course, aside from uniforms, the badges, the deltas, there are lots of little sidebars showing the evolution of the deltas throughout the century. Love that part sprinkled throughout these chapters. That's extremely cool. Plus, like the rank braids and badges and things like that, you get little sidebars showing those off too, what they mean. Love those things. That kind of stuff, uniform stuff, excites me. But there is also, I do want to do a yellow alert. I don't think I could put anything on screen without spoiling it. I don't want to give the text away. But I think in this chapter, there is a really cool sidebar explaining Starship command codes that I recommend reading. I know my players have frequently tried to make use of command codes and what they've seen from the series and Wrath of Khan and things like that, how Starship command codes were used. Recommend going in. The sidebars are always good in the Star Trek Adventures books. Don't skip them by, even the lore ones, especially the lore ones. Read them. And there's another one coming up soon. I think my notes are in here. I'm going to mention. But stand down, yellow alert. Command codes. Pretty darn cool. Next, we move into Chapter 5, the final lore chapter, the final background setting chapter. This era is labeled Conspiracies and the Thaw. Not related to the Voyager episode, but Conspiracies and the Thaw, referring, of course, to the thawing of tensions in the Cold War between the Federation and Klingon. So Conspiracies and the Thaw, this ranges from 2270 all the way to the end of the century, 2299. This is the final chunk here. So I'm giving this another yellow alert. State of the Galaxy goes through a lot of things such as the major incidents like V'ger, Genesis. But the reason for the yellow alert, speaking of V'ger, is what I just mentioned a moment ago about the sidebars. There is an awesome sidebar right here involving V'ger encountering the sphere, the data sphere that appears in Star Trek Discovery Season 2, and their interaction together, like basically a conversation between Voyager and the sphere. If you like lore, if you like little fleshing out of things like this, these obscure little details and facts, and just bringing together the franchise and meshing them in a way, I think you're going to love this. I did. That was cool. So, as always, check the sidebars. Read all the sidebars, especially these lore ones too. You get so many ideas out there. I get so many ideas. I hope you do too, but they are rich. Okay. Apologies. There we go. So, where was I? Yes, of course. Same thing, aside from the lore, what's going on in this century where there's so many crises, well probed. You got the Nimbus 3 and the Galactic Army of Light, I believe they're called. You have the whole conspiracy to murder the Klingon Chancellor. All that stuff is in this time, so the politics is through the roof. The technology is through the roof on here, and it does talk about those big technologies that were introduced during these films. Genesis Project, Transwarp, it explains what those are in general, so you could have a bigger background on what they were about that we saw in the movies. So these 4 chapters, 2, 3, 4, and 5, breaking the century down into asymmetric eras. That's where you want to go to just fill your head with all the knowledge of what happened in the century that you might have forgotten about, or things that you might not have considered exploring. I loved reading these chapters, and I'm going to repeat for the 20th time, read the sidebars. Please read the sidebars. All right, next, Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is playing in the 23rd century, and no alerts coming up here, not at the moment, at the very least. This is the chapter that I wrote for, or I contributed for. I wrote for the first 4 sections in this chapter. I wrote basically everything related to the Federation, playing in the Federation at this time. As far as the other polities, and at the end of the chapter about the roles, those duties were taken over by our good friends on the channel, Al Spader and Michael Dismuke. They covered that, plus I believe some of the sidebars that are peppered through here were written by other authors. I don't know who was in charge of writing what lore sidebars and whatever, but my aspects were all the Federation things. So going in, I don't think I can comfortably give anything I wrote an alert. Maybe there's something, but we'll get to that in a second. Maybe there's something we'll get in a second. But if I do give an alert to something, it's going to be for something I didn't write, because that just feels dirty. I can't give them. It's my idea. Why am I saying it? Yeah. Anyhow, but I like what I wrote. But anyhow, playing in the 23rd century, broken down into 4 subsections, and these are all connected to the previous 4 chapters. So each subsection is one of the eras. So it's in the growth of Federation, then the War and Red Angel, then the Federation and Empire, and then the Conspiracies and the Thaw. Blanked on that for a second. So it's covering that, and basically this is advice for the setting the tone of playing during these eras. So for players, just kind of what to keep in mind, how to visualize these eras when you're in them, and for the GMs as well, what is the tone, what could the tone be like for the era, and what I can do for this chapter that I could not do for any other book is I can actually get you into the mindset of what is behind the words on this page here, why I wrote what I wrote. The reason, what I like to do, what I really love to do when I do any kind of story or just think about anything I like trying to make connections. I like trying to rationalize why what I see in one thing connects to another thing, even if there's no logical connection or that connection hasn't been established yet. So taking a look at the century and trying to think, why is the century this way? Why is this TV series with this tone, with this mood, but this series, which is set in a similar time period, in this different tone, in this different mood? So I was trying to think on that, reflecting on the series and the episodes. So my advice in this chapter is trying to convey why that setting, that tone for that particular series was the way it was, and why you could play that era in that tone to match that sort of feeling. So for example, just going into the Discovery, Strange New Worlds, original series era, you have Star Trek Discovery, which from the get-go, season 1, first episode, it has a very dark tone. It has a very separated, distant from what we imagine Star Trek of that era. We've never seen it dark like that before. And sure enough, that kind of darkness, that unease, it grows, it builds, and the war breaks out. There's a huge galactic crisis in those years, particularly for the Federation. So you see characters being snippy with one another, being more confrontational and downright rude to each other, their co-workers, than we're used to in Star Trek series. So why was it like that? It's like that because of the war, the tensions. They're on Discovery, especially, they're on a secret mission on an experimental device. They have the weight of the world, the galaxy on their shoulders. And it's a deep secret. It's a top secret. They can't talk about it. Then the whole galaxy is embroiled in war. And we already talked about trauma, how that's brought up, the PTSD, how that's part of it. So that's why there's this dark tone. That's why you can play this era in the dark tone. But then, just a few years later, Strange New Worlds, it has a more upbeat, friendly, almost silly kind of vibe. And especially in the recent season, it gets a little bit sillier and sillier. How is that possible? Just a few years ago, there was war. And they do talk about the war in Strange New Worlds. And you do see the heaviness. But my rationalization was, a captain like Pike, and I'm sure many other captains similar to him, realized the sacrifices, the pain, the suffering, how bad the war years were. And not just those years, but those feelings, those traumas linger. And you still see them in Strange New Worlds. They linger. So captains like Pike wanted to create a more relaxed, a little more friendly atmosphere on their ships. So they let people be a lot more casual. They let people like Ortegas joke around. People on the bridge are feeling, it feels like a group of friends out on an adventure together, rather than that strict military that just came out of a war. And that's done to try to bring up morale, try to get them focused on the positives of exploration, even after they've seen the horrors of war. So the tone for this era is focused more on bringing people back into the hopefulness that they lost during the war. And then as they start to recover, as they get over it, the hierarchy comes back into it. Like, okay, now we can be a little more formal. Now we can start bringing things down. So we're in the TOS era now, where there's a little more of the rigid structure now, because people have kind of gotten out of their system. The horrors of the war are still in the back of their minds, but they're not there front and center day after day, so they can get back into that rigid structure. But these captains, these soldiers, these officers, they're still veterans of that era, so they have that more gung-ho cowboy aspect to them. That's why you see more TOS captains beaming down to the planet, be like, you stay up here, ensign, I'm going down and doing this, because they have faith in themselves. They've been tested by fire. They don't want to put others at risk. They put themselves at risk. So that's how my mindset was going into that, and that's how what I'm trying to convey in the Federation aspect in this chapter, for how these different series so close to each other are structurally, tonally different, but why it can make sense and why it could be played that way when you cover that era in your time. That was long, that was wordy, that was out of control. I'm sorry about it, but this is the first thing I wrote. I'm excited for it. I hope you enjoy. I hope you understand. But these subsections also include sample focuses, sample traits, and sample values that characters in that era might have or you might want to consider that reflects what's going on and the feelings and the tones of that era. So it does help you a little bit for character building. But now I am going to give an alert, a bit of a different alert, if I may. I'm going to give a blue alert. First time blue alerts for exceptional circumstances, and I think that applies. I'm going to give you, those of you who are watching this, you're going to be amongst the few in the universe that get to hear this thing. And I'm just going to share with you. It's stupid, it's pointless, but since you're the only ones aside from me who will ever get to know about it, I gotta share it with someone. I want to share with you something that I had to cut from this chapter. So what I had to cut from the chapter is a little joke I put in, and when I was writing, it was one of the things that came to me first as I was typing the text here, and I loved it. Based on what I was saying, I kept there like, oh, I can't wait to see if somebody gets that little joke, that little pun, whatever it is that I put inside. But then as I was editing the chapter down, because you have to stick to very strict word count, I needed to lose some words. The joke wasn't necessary. It added nothing but making me smile. So sadly, I cut it, but I loved it. Anyhow, I will give it to you now to the best of my ability that I remember. But it's in chapter 6.2, the very opening, when we have our spotlight character, the ambassador Raymond Merton. He has the little commentary at the beginning of every section, as they do in these chapters. He says this, which is on screen. You could see it on the page. He said, "The tone in these 2 years," which is talking about the war years, "the tone in these 2 years is unlike those before and those that follow. For example, Commander Mbenga during the Battle of Jigal in 2257 is different from the Dr. Mbenga we meet on Pike's Enterprise 2 years later." And then the part that I cut was the following line would read, "And he's a completely different man when we see him next on Kirk's Enterprise." If you get it, you get it. I thought it was funny. I had a good time. I'm still heartbroken I had to cut it, but at least some people now hear the joke. Apologies. Moving on. But in addition to what I just said, there are sections telling you how to play character options for Klingons, for Romulans, and other polities, as well as a general questions for any character to think about during this time period for you to reflect on, to try to put you in the mind of a character living during those times. The final section in this chapter was not written by me at all. This is roles in the 23rd century, and I'm giving this a yellow alert because this is expertly done. Go look up the role that you're playing in the game. Communications officer, commander, security, whatever it is. Go to that section for that era and see how that role is different during those years compared to general, compared to normal. If there's anything that puts more emphasis or maybe puts that role in a different spotlight in that time, you will find that information there, and that will add and support your role play immensely. So stand down, yellow alert. That's chapter 6. Last chapter, chapter 7, Game Mastering in the 23rd century. This one, of course, another amazing chapter. For me, this is the chapter I jump to first all the times in the books because I am the forever GM. Same as before, it breaks it down into 4 groups based on the previous 4 established eras in this book. And it then breaks down each era very, very expertly into themes, into tones, into styles of play, and campaign structures. And these aren't just copy and pasted for each era. It adapts it to what I was just talking about, how every era feels different, feels unique to the ones that come before and after it. And it adapts the kind of tones that you'll see in the first 50 years are different from the tones in the war years, those 2 years. And the themes are different in the different eras. And the style of play that you might want to do could be different based on which era that you're in. And it gives you nice little snippets of advice for running all of those different eras as close to how they were expressed, how they felt on screen that we saw in the variety of series and in the films. And also extrapolating back to Enterprise and Discovery and finding a happy medium between the two to see how we got from there to here. So that is Chapter 7, and that is the book. Star Trek Adventures 2nd Edition, 23rd Century Campaign Guide. Let me jump back out of the small window. And my final thoughts. Well, first of all, I'm just over the moon because, like I said, this is the first physical book for anything Star Trek I got to write for, I got to contribute for. So I'm happy, I'm gushing, I apologize. I know you won't care. You don't want to hear me rant on that, but I'm so happy. That's why I had to dress in my Monster Maroon today. This is a big event. But thoughts on this book. I think this is a great idea. We have not had a setting guide quite like this before. We had a location setting with Shackleton Expanse. We had location settings with first edition's Quadrant books, but now we have a setting that covers an entire century and all the events, the technology, the politics that came up through that century, and not only how it came up, but how it evolved from the beginning to the end, and how we watch the series and the Federation and Starfleet and the Klingons and all of those things evolve and change and morph from where they were to where they end up. I think it's a great new addition to the lineup of Star Trek Adventures because it's unique, it's different from what we have. The 2nd edition book starts setting neutral, even though it has a nice Strange New Worlds visual theme to it. It's no longer tied to any one timeline like the first edition was with the Next Generation era. So having that be so broad open provides us with a chance to get these actual century setting books so you can have a reference guide to go to the setting that you want. Right now there's only one book. I can only imagine if this book is successful, we'll be getting a 22nd century, we'll be getting a 24th century. There's very little 25th, but we might get something out of there like a Picard's source book. We might get a Discovery 32nd into 33rd century book. So if this book is successful, we could get a lot more of these, and I'm all for that. Again, I was asked to write for this. I couldn't be happier, but I'm first and foremost a player, a GM. I'm only involved with Star Trek Adventures because I just fell in love with it playing it. I'm not part of Modiphius. I'm just honored to be included in something like this. I hope I'm included in something again in the future. This was fun for me to work on. But as a player, as a customer, I want more of these kinds of books. I love guides that are entire enclosed settings. I want a century source book like this. I want a starship source book like Utopia Planitia. I want an updated one. I want one for alien ships. I want an aliens guide of the worlds and the people. I want an equipment book. I know equipment is nothing but traits in Star Trek Adventures. I don't care if there's no stats in it at all. I want an equipment book. I want a one-stop shop to go to find the information that I want. So this is the kind of book that I love. Ever since I was a Star Wars D6 player, mostly Game Master, 30 years ago, the books I love the most are the self-contained, one topic, here it is, all in one book guide. That's what this is. That's one of these, and that's what I love. So I hope you enjoyed this book. If you got a copy, if you read through it, tell me what you think. If you have any questions, please ask. If you read my chapter, tear it apart, but say something. Let me know. It's stunning to me to think other people will be reading something that I have written. It's if I keep talking, I'll probably start crying. So, as always, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this review. Hope you enjoyed the videos. Stick around, chat with me somewhere. Always post a message, comment. I want to talk to you people, especially about this book for certain reasons I'm not going to repeat. But anyhow, as always, thank you for watching. Stay safe out there, my friends. Live long and prosper. Peace and long life. I'll see you next time.